Hey guys, so we're just going to do a quick video on this. I wasn't even going to bother, but I thought, you never know, it might help somebody else in the future, which is what most of these videos I've done over the years were intended to do. So this is the main chassis from a Fender Cyber Twin amplifier. This was I think probably their first foray into the digital effects type things, and it was super expensive, and I think it came out about, well, I guess in 2001. I actually bought one of the originals from one of the guitar shows back in the day. 1,200 quid this was, and it was pretty unusual because it had a whole bank of motorized controls. And the idea behind this amp is to it's pretty much got the full range of Fender amps in it, and the circuitry, which you can see here, switches. So if you select I don't know, a Fender Twin from a certain year, all of these will turn to different positions. Parts of the circuitry is switched in and out, and it was their take on that particular amp, a Fender Twin. If you wanted something else, you would select it, and again they would all turn and do their thing, and other parts of the circuitry would work. And the first one I had was pretty good. It was going back 18 years, so those days it was really impressive. Unfortunately, times got a bit tough and it had to be sold, and then this particular one, I'll probably show you the rest of it in a separate video. If I haven't already, actually, I may have already videoed what I've got. But anyway, this particular one was bought from a professional guitarist, and he toured with the Osmonds in the UK using this, and I think that was probably 2012, so I probably bought it 5 or 6 years ago from him. It was a bit banged up. I didn't realise that until we actually got there to pick it up. There's a few scratches on these knobs. This one's a bit stiff. That's banged up but works, and that's banged up but works, and it's just well used. The actual cabinet that it goes into is similar, not too bad, but well gigged. And this has been in use for me, just really shadow stuff and a bit of messing around from time to time. I've got it looped out to an Oasis Quadriverb with the shadows patches, and also a Behringer tuner. And in fact I built them into, I'm sure I did a video on this, I must have done, I built them into another Cyber Twin cabinet as if they were sort of rack mount, and that sits on top of the normal amplifier. Must have done a video on it. I can't believe I would have let that go with no video. So yeah, we've got 12AX7 preamp section. There's the motorized knobs. There's various ins and outs. We've got MIDI in and out, send and effects loops, headphone, this line out, XLR out. Yeah, also an SPF diff out. Anyway, the reason it's in here at the moment is because I hadn't recorded anything for absolutely ages. I've got a Zoom MRS 1044, and let me see if I can turn this around and just show you the back. So when I record things, or certainly on the old amp, I would use the stereo position and use these XLR outs straight into the recording studio. What you can do then is you plug in your headphones, or just the jack actually, into this, and that cuts out the amplifier's speakers. Now of course that's perfect because you don't want necessarily the sound coming out of the speakers whilst it's going through a recording system. So yeah, came to use it, connected it all back up as normal, plugged the headphones in, and it didn't mute the sound from the amplifier, which in my case was the end of that. That was no more recording possible for me, not in my setup. Now, because I bought a second one of these, faulty, just for the cabinet, I had quite a lot of the, well, I've got a main board, this board, this one, and the effects, which I think is, can't see it, yeah, that's the effects board. So I, without looking at the circuit diagram, just popped this board out and fitted the new one. This, in fact, the new one, or the used one, is in there now. And nothing really obvious immediately for the old one that I took out, but it didn't cure the problem. And when I looked more closely at this board, this connection here, I think it was pin 1, and a couple of others had a very, very tiny dry joint on them, almost invisible. So I've resoldered all of those, and of course that made no difference. And then I looked at the circuit diagram and realised that there's nothing on here that's controlling the speaker mute, apart from the mute line, which goes to the headphone socket. And I can't remember which way round it is. I think it's either held low now with nothing plugged in, and when you plug something in, it goes high, and that then mutes the speakers. So I found dry joints on this. Get the bloody thing back on. There we go. So unfortunately I had to then take out the main chassis. So it's pretty straightforward. You do need to remove this board, this one. I all unscrew from the outside. Take the valves out, undo the various connections between the front board. It's only a few, and leave the rest in place. It looks like you have to remove all of the transformer cables, but you don't actually have to do that. Once these boards are out, you can access all of the chassis screws, and in this case there's also some under here. You need to remove the 5 that you can see there by the speaker wires, and also these ones along that rail there, which is just bracing the circuit board. Anyway, so once you've got these out and all the screws loose, in fact you can't get to some of these screws with this board in place. You need to undo the 4 screws holding this transformer in place. It's 2 now, it's 4. So just undo those. It's really heavy. Slide it out and you can put it down to one side, and that will allow you to take the rest of the screws out, and then you can just well, obviously you have to remove all the knobs. Don't have to touch this section, absolutely nothing there. That is on a separate board and is only connected with these ribbon cables, but you do need to just pull all these off and undo the input, and then you'll find with all the screws out you can actually pull the circuit board back, pull it up. You might have to flex this front metal, just pull it towards you a little bit, and you will be able to get that board out and turned over. So anyway, looking at the circuit diagram, it's a pretty straightforward muting circuit, and although the circuit isn't brilliantly written out, it's done in almost sort of handwritten. It was pretty obvious that it was all down here what was going on. There's only a few components really to check, and the one thing that was faulty is that it looks like it's Q20, but I think it's actually Q2D. So it's hard to read on the circuit, and it's pretty hard to see it, you know, in here. I think that is, oops, if it'll focus, I think it's a D, but look, it's there. It's just to the where are we? It's just to the right of that cement resistor, 5-watt resistor, so you can't really miss it. If you have a headphone muting problem or lack of, then check those components from the circuit diagram. In this case there was a short between 2 of the pins. The transistor is a 2N4403. It's a PNP. I'm sure you could fit pretty much anything in that path or in that position. But yeah, so now all we've got to do now is get it all reassembled. Unscrewing it from the chassis is simple. There's screws in the top and there's screws in the side. I'm not even going to show that. It's completely obvious how that all goes back together. The only thing I could say is there are pressed in captive nuts. They're little round things there. Let me zoom in on this one. Yeah, you can see one there, and I found that one fell off. So just in here it's fallen off, and I've put it somewhere. I'm going to try and press it back into place. Possibly I'll have to glue it in place. Once the screws gone into the thread and you've done it up, it's not an issue. But they can just fall off, and you've got it all back together again, and it's in the cabinet, and you hear one of those fall off and you've got to take it all out again. Not really safe to leave it floating around. Yeah, so anyway, yeah, a quick look at the Fender Cyber Twin internals, and fixing the headlamp headphone mute circuit. There's a few other components there. Any one of them could have failed, but oh, and I also should have mentioned that where that ribbon cable joins the main chassis, we also had dry joints on the same pins, strangely enough. I'm pretty certain it was pin 1 and pin 1. I seem to think pin 1 is the mute line, but certainly resolder all of them, and it doesn't hurt to check all of the soldering if you've got it this far apart, and I suspect that is what's damaged the transistor there. As I say, PNP, yeah, and yeah, hopefully this will be fine when it's plugged back in.